When did you outsmart your parents? I saved my dog's life because I refused to sleep. You see, my family had the strictest bedtime rule of anyone I knew. 9 p.m. meant lights out and consoles off. And when my only friend in the world said to our clan, maybe we should find a different teammate who can actually play, I knew I had to find a loophole. She was the one person who didn't care that I was the weird kid at school. Losing her meant losing everything. I learned to lie completely still with my eyes shut, breathing so evenly that Mom's flashlight checks never caught me. Even my dog Rex would sneak into my room and wag his tail like he was happy for me. But one night, something unusual happened. My parents came in at 10:30 p.m., and through barely cracked eyes, I watched my mom open my piggy bank while Dad held his phone flashlight. Take $60 from his piggy bank, and 40 from the Pokemon cards he sold, she whispered, counting bills. Then came the part that made my blood freeze. Mom moved to my desk and picked up the jar labeled Rex's surgery fund in my handwriting. $300 here, she said, emptying it into her purse. Rex is old anyway. This money could triple on tonight's game. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Every dollar I earned was funding their gambling while they thought I slept. The next few weeks became a twisted game of cat and mouse. At dinner, I mentioned casually, Rex seems sicker lately. My parents exchanged a quick glance that told me everything. The next morning, Mom cornered me at breakfast. Your phone was warm when I checked on you. She watched my face like a hawk. Must have been from charging, I said, pouring cereal. It wasn't plugged in. I paused for half a second too long. Sometimes I sleep on it. Body heat. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. Soon, my parents started testing me, showing me how they were documenting everything. Explain this, my dad said one evening, showing me a photo of my charger. Yesterday, it was by your bed. Today, it's by your desk. I shrugged, trying to look confused. I must move it without thinking? He pulled out another photo. What about Tuesday? Wednesday? Different spots every day. My throat went dry. I'm reorganizing my room. We stared at each other until Mom called us for dinner. The thought of me knowing the truth drove them crazy. They escalated their investigation through careful observation. Found this in your trash, Mom said, holding up a Snickers wrapper like evidence in court. The expiration date is December 2024. It's January. Someone gave it to me at school. Someone gave you expired candy? She set the wrapper on the counter between us. And you ate it at night? After brushing your teeth? I forgot to throw it away earlier. She knew I was lying. I knew she knew, but she couldn't prove anything. Meanwhile, Rex's limp was getting worse every day, and we were running out of time. They started taking photos of my room each night, comparing positions of everything from my slippers to my school books. When my Discord showed online at midnight, Mom presented it like a smoking gun. Technical glitch, I insisted. Discord's been weird lately. She pulled up my cousin's Instagram. Is this a glitch too? You liked his post at 11:47 p.m. I think someone hacked me, I said desperately. She just stared at me, and I stared back, both of us knowing the truth but neither admitting it. The investigation reached its peak when Dad announced at dinner. Bad news, buddy. You only have $100 saved for Rex. That's not nearly enough. They watched my face carefully, looking for surprise or anger. Mom's hand gripped her fork so tight her knuckles went white. When I just nodded sadly, they seemed frustrated. Rex must have sensed something because he limped over and put his head on my lap. The silence stretched so long I could hear everyone's breathing. That night, I heard them planning outside my door. Tomorrow night, we'll test him one more time. Go straight for the dog. The next evening at 10 p.m., they stood outside my room. Then I heard them walk over to where Rex slept by my bed. Look at this pathetic mutt, Dad said loudly. Can barely walk. Probably won't last another month anyway. Mom added, waste of money even trying to save him. Should have gotten rid of him years ago. I stayed perfectly still, but my whole body was shaking with rage. Then Dad did something that broke me. He took 3 steps and kicked Rex in the ribs. I shot up before I could stop myself. Don't you dare touch him! They spun around, triumphant. We knew it! You've been faking this whole time! Dad shouted. The room exploded with months of deception on both sides. You've been stealing from Grandma too, I said quietly. Phone already recording. They froze. Her banking app on my phone. She asked me to monitor it after the money went missing. Dad lunged for my phone, but I was already hitting send on the family group chat. That night I heard them planning outside my door. Tomorrow night we'll say we're putting Rex down. If he doesn't react, he's really asleep. The next evening at 10 p.m., they stood outside my room. Mom's voice cracked with fake tears. I can't believe we have to put Rex to sleep tomorrow. Dad added, we have no choice, not enough money. They must have noticed something because suddenly they burst through the door. I was sitting up, phone in hand, recording everything. You monsters! How could you put Rex down? I screamed. We knew it! You've been faking this whole time! Dad shouted back. The room exploded with months of deception on both sides. You've been stealing from Grandma too, I said quietly. They froze. Her banking app on my phone. She asked me to monitor it after the money went missing. Dad lunged for my phone, but I was already hitting send on the family group chat. The message went through and my phone started buzzing like crazy with notifications from aunts and uncles and cousins, all seeing the video at once. Mom made another grab for my phone and I twisted away from her, stumbling backward toward my bedroom door while Rex cowered behind my legs. Dad's face turned red and he started yelling something about respect, but I couldn't really hear him over the blood pounding in my ears. My phone kept lighting up with messages, and I saw Grandma's name pop up saying she was on her way right now. Mom lunged at me again, and this time her nails scratched my arm as I dodged past her into the hallway. Rex limped after me as fast as he could, while Dad shouted threats about taking my phone away forever. I ran to the bathroom and slammed the door shut, turning the lock just as Dad's fist hit the wood. Rex was shaking against my leg, and I dropped to my knees to check where Dad had kicked him. His ribs felt okay, but he whimpered when I touched the spot and I could feel him trembling. Through the door, I could hear Mom on her phone, her voice high and panicked as she tried to explain to someone that it wasn't what it looked like. Dad kept pounding on the bathroom door, demanding I come out and delete everything right now. My phone showed 47 messages in the family chat already, and more kept coming. Some relatives were asking if this was real, while others were already angry. Mom's voice got louder as she talked to what sounded like her sister, saying we were just disciplining the dog and I was being dramatic. Rex pressed closer to me and I held him tight, feeling his heart racing as fast as mine. 20 minutes passed with them alternating between threats and fake nice voices trying to get me to unlock the door. Then, I heard car doors slamming outside, and Grandma's voice downstairs along with my uncle's deeper one. The front door must have been unlocked because suddenly there was yelling from the living room. Grandma sounded angrier than I'd ever heard her, and my uncle was threatening to call the police if they didn't let him see me. Mom ran downstairs and the arguing got even louder. I stayed locked in the bathroom with Rex, listening to them fight about the money and the dog and whether I was lying. My uncle's voice got really firm, and he said the word police again. Everything went quiet for a second, and then I heard footsteps coming upstairs. Grandma called my name softly and said it was safe to come out. I unlocked the door and she pulled me into a hug while Rex stayed pressed against my legs. She told me to pack a bag quickly and she'd stand guard. I grabbed clothes and school stuff, shoving them into my backpack while she blocked my doorway. Dad stood in the hall muttering about ungrateful kids and how we'd regret this. Mom just watched from their bedroom door with tears running down her face, but they didn't try to stop us. Grandma kept her hand on my shoulder as we walked past them and down the stairs. My uncle waited by the front door and walked us to Grandma's car. I climbed into the back seat with Rex on my lap, and as soon as the doors closed, I started crying harder than I had in years. Grandma drove away from the house while talking on her phone through the car speakers to someone at her bank. She was asking about recent transactions and password changes, and her voice sounded worried. Rex licked my face and curled up on my lap, even though he barely fit. Grandma kept looking at me in the mirror and telling me everything would be okay now. She said I was staying with her, and we'd figure everything out together. Her house felt quiet and safe when we got there, but I couldn't relax. Rex stayed right next to me on the guest bed that first night, taking up most of the space. I kept checking the family chat where a full war had started. Some relatives believed my parents when they said it was just occasional fun gambling and I was overreacting. Others were furious about the theft and the dog abuse. Grandma had posted asking everyone to give us space to handle this properly. The next morning, Grandma woke me up early saying we needed to get Rex checked immediately. At the emergency vet clinic, they took x-rays and documented the bruising on his ribs. The vet said we were lucky nothing was broken, but Rex needed his surgery soon, and the estimate made my stomach drop. $3,500 for everything including the emergency visit today. Grandma squeezed my hand and said we'd figure it out. I took photos of the vet report and posted them to the family chat showing Rex's injuries and the cost. Within minutes, Mom texted me privately from a number I didn't recognize, saying I was destroying our family over a dog. My hands shook as I blocked the number without responding. Monday at the school, I could barely keep my eyes open, and the counselor pulled me aside during second period. She asked if everything was okay at home, and something about her kind voice made me tell her everything. Her face got more serious as I explained about the stealing and Rex and living with Grandma now. She said she had to file a report with Child Protective Services by law. My stomach felt sick, but I understood why she had to do it. After school, Grandma took me with her to the bank where she discovered way more money missing than we'd thought. The bank lady showed us transactions going back 6 months, adding up to almost $2,000. Grandma's face went pale, and she immediately had them freeze all her accounts and change every password. That same evening, my phone started buzzing with texts from Dad, and I could see the preview showing long paragraphs about how they sacrificed everything for me and worked double shifts to give me a good life. The messages kept coming while Grandma made dinner, each one getting longer with stuff about how the gambling was just entertainment, and they were going to pay everyone back with their next big win. I screenshot every single text without opening them so he wouldn't see the read receipts, then put them in a folder labeled evidence that the counselor had told me to start. Rex stayed close to my leg while I sat at Grandma's kitchen table watching the notifications pile up, his tail wagging slower than usual like he could sense the stress. My Discord finally pinged with a message from Layla Kelly, asking where I'd been for the past 3 nights since our clan had been trying to do raids without me. I typed out everything that happened, my fingers shaking a little as I explained about my parents stealing Rex's surgery money and kicking him and how I was living with Grandma now. She responded immediately saying her parents were cool with me playing earlier in the evenings, since they understood my situation, and having one normal thing in my life right now actually helped my chest feel less tight. After dinner, Grandma pulled out a calculator, and we sat down to figure out Rex's surgery costs realistically, since the vet bill was $3,500 total. She moved money around in her budget, showing me she could cover about $2,000, but I needed to contribute at least $1,500, which meant finding work fast. I started searching job sites on my phone while she called her friend who owned a pet store to see if they were hiring, and Rex put his head on my lap like he understood we were doing this for him. 2 days passed with more angry texts from my parents before a number I didn't recognize called, and when I answered, a woman introduced herself as the CPS worker assigned to my case. She needed to schedule an interview and home visit. Her voice professional but kind as she explained the process and what would happen next. Grandma held my hand while I took the call, squeezing it when my voice got shaky, answering questions about where I was staying, and if I felt safe. The next afternoon, I was doing homework when I heard pounding on Grandma's front door, and through the window I could see Mom standing there crying and yelling to please let her talk to me. Grandma went to the door, but didn't open it, telling Mom through the glass that she wasn't welcome and needed to leave immediately. Mom kept banging on the door and screaming about her baby, and how Grandma was poisoning me against her, so Grandma called 911 while I recorded everything on my phone from the hallway. The police showed up within 10 minutes and I watched through the living room window as they talked to Mom, who was gesturing wildly and pointing at the house. The officer kept shaking his head and finally told her she needed to leave or she'd be arrested for trespassing, and watching my own mother get escorted to her car by police made my stomach hurt, even though I knew she brought it on herself. Meanwhile, the family group chat had turned into an absolute war zone with relatives picking sides and arguing about whether my parents were addicts or just stressed parents trying to have fun. Grandma posted a long message about boundaries and included links to gambling addiction resources, explaining that enabling them wasn't helping anyone. Dad immediately responded, calling her a bitter old woman who was trying to steal his son, which made my aunt and 2 cousins turn against him completely and post about how they'd noticed money missing too. 3 days later, Grandma drove me to my parents' house while they were at work, so I could get more of my stuff for a longer stay. The house felt weird and cold, even though nothing had really changed, like it belonged to strangers instead of being where I grew up. We worked fast, grabbing my clothes from my dresser and closet, my school supplies from my desk, and most importantly, Rex's medications from the bathroom cabinet. I also grabbed my gaming headset and the birthday cards from my drawer that had cash my parents hadn't found yet, shoving everything into garbage bags while Grandma kept watch at the window. That night, I was finally getting ready to play with Layla and the clan when my phone suddenly showed no service and wouldn't connect to anything. Grandma immediately called her carrier and found out my parents had canceled my line without warning, probably hoping to cut me off from everyone. She added me to her plan right there on the phone, and we spent the next hour porting my number over, which felt weird depending on her for something as basic as phone service, but I didn't have another choice. The next day at the school, the counselor helped me organize all my evidence into a clear timeline for CPS, printing out the screenshots of Dad's texts and the photos of my empty piggy bank and Rex's empty surgery jar. We put together a document showing the pattern of surveillance with all their photos of my room and the recordings of them testing me, and especially the video of Dad kicking Rex. Seeing everything laid out in chronological order made it impossible to deny what had been happening for months, and the counselor said this would really help my case. On my way home from the school, I stopped at the pet store near Grandma's house, where her friend was the manager, and filled out a job application right there at the counter. The manager liked that I actually cared about animals and had experience with a sick dog, offering me weekend shifts starting that Saturday at minimum wage. It wasn't much money, but every dollar would help with Rex's surgery, and having something productive to do would keep me from going crazy thinking about everything else. 3 days later, the counselor pulled me out of math class and walked me to her office, where a woman in a gray suit was waiting with a clipboard and a serious face. She introduced herself as the CPS worker and asked me to tell her everything from the beginning while the counselor sat next to me nodding. I went through the whole story about the fake sleeping and the stolen money, and showed her the video of Dad kicking Rex, which made her write faster on her notepad. She asked about the surveillance photos and how long they'd been watching me at night, and whether I felt safe now at Grandma's house. After an hour of questions, she said the case would stay open while they investigated, and gave me her card in case anything else happened. That same afternoon, my phone started blowing up with notifications from the family group chat, where my aunt had started a GoFundMe link for Rex's surgery. Some relatives were donating $20 or $50, but my uncle posted that we were just enabling my disrespect and that I should go back home. The argument got so heated that Grandma had to mute the chat for a while, but at least we had raised $300 already. Later that evening, I finally logged onto Discord and saw Layla had messaged me 12 times asking if I was okay. The whole clan was online, and when I joined the voice chat, they all said they were glad I was safe and nobody cared that I could only play for 2 hours. We ran 3 matches, and for those 2 hours I forgot about everything else and just focused on the game like a normal kid. The next morning, Grandma took Rex back to the vet for a checkup, and the vet said the pain meds were helping, but we really needed to do the surgery within 2 weeks. We scheduled it for exactly 14 days out, which meant we had that long to get the rest of the money together. The countdown made everything feel more urgent, and I kept checking the GoFundMe every few hours. 2 days later, I was in English class when the office assistant came to get me saying my parents were there to sign me out. The principal was already on the phone with Grandma when I got there, and I could hear her through the speaker telling them absolutely not. Security had to walk my parents out to the parking lot, while Mom kept yelling that I was her son and she had rights. Now there's a big red note in my file about the custody situation, and the office staff all know what's going on. That night, Grandma went to her first Gam-Anon meeting at the community center and came back with red eyes from crying. She said hearing other people's stories about their family members with gambling problems helped her understand it wasn't her fault for not seeing it sooner. She brought home pamphlets about enabling and boundaries that we read together on the couch while Rex slept between us. Meanwhile, the bank had been investigating the unauthorized transfers from Grandma's account and needed my parents to explain where the money went. Dad sent me a long text blaming me for ruining their credit score and their lives, but I just screenshot it and saved it to my evidence folder. The next week, I had my second session with the school counselor, where we talked about feeling guilty, even though my parents were the ones who stole. She explained that consequences aren't the same as punishment, and that my parents were just facing what naturally happens when you take money that isn't yours. It helped a little, but I still felt bad seeing them struggle, even after everything they did to Rex and me. Saturday morning, I showed up for my first shift at the pet store, wearing the blue polo shirt they gave me. The manager showed me how to work the register and scan items and count change, and then taught me to clean the hamster and guinea pig cages. My hands smelled like wood shavings and disinfectant by lunch, but I didn't mind because every dollar was going to help Rex. When I got my schedule for the next 2 weeks, I calculated I'd make about $200 before Rex's surgery if I picked up extra hours. Grandma's lawyer friend came over that evening with a stack of papers about custody and guardianship options. She explained that since I was 16, the judge would listen to what I wanted and where I felt safe living. We filled out all the paperwork for temporary guardianship with Grandma as my guardian, and the lawyer said she'd file it at the courthouse on Monday morning for free. Tuesday morning, Grandma got a call from Dad saying he'd started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings because CPS required it. She put him on speaker, and I could hear the fake sincerity in his voice as he talked about taking responsibility and making changes. Grandma rolled her eyes at me across the kitchen table. After he hung up, she said she'd believe it when she saw real change, not just showing up for attendance sheets. Mom hadn't enrolled in anything yet, according to the CPS worker who called later that day. She was still insisting she didn't have a problem and that Dad was the one with issues. The worker said this difference in their responses was creating problems between them, which wasn't surprising. That same afternoon, 3 of my aunts messaged me after seeing the photo I posted of Rex looking sad with his cone from the vet visit. They each sent money through Venmo with notes like, "For sweet Rex" and "Get that baby his surgery." Combined with my first paycheck from the pet store and what Grandma had saved, we finally had enough for the full $3,500. I sat on the floor next to Rex and hugged him carefully around his sore ribs, telling him we were going to fix him. Wednesday, the CPS worker came to check Grandma's house and make sure I was in a good environment. She looked at my room and asked about school and checked that I had clean clothes and enough food. Rex followed us around, wagging his tail slowly, which seemed to charm her. She mentioned that if my parents completed their required counseling sessions, I might be able to have supervised visits with them. I nodded, but my stomach felt tight at the thought. Thursday afternoon, a police officer met me at my parents' house so I could get more of my stuff for staying at Grandma's long-term. Mom stood in the doorway watching while I packed my winter clothes and grabbed my Xbox and school projects. Her face was puffy from crying, and when I walked past with my last box, she whispered that she was sorry. The officer stood between us and I wanted to believe her, but all I could think about was Rex's surgery fund disappearing into her purse. Friday night before Rex's surgery, I pushed my dinner around my plate, unable to eat the chicken Grandma made. Layla kept texting me funny TikToks and memes about dogs and cones to distract me, but my hands were shaking too much to type back properly. Grandma noticed and said Rex could sleep in my bed tonight, even though she usually made him stay on his dog bed on the floor. He curled up next to me, and I stayed awake most of the night with my hand on his side, feeling him breathe. Saturday morning, we dropped Rex off at the vet clinic at 7 for his surgery. The vet said it would take about 4 hours, and they'd call when he was in recovery. Grandma and I sat in the waiting room drinking terrible coffee from their machine and flipping through old magazines without reading them. Other people came and went, picking up their healthy pets while we waited. Finally, at noon, the vet came out still in her scrubs and said everything went well. The growth was removed and Rex would need lots of rest, but he should make a full recovery. I started crying right there in the waiting room, and Grandma pulled me into a hug that smelled like her lavender perfume. Sunday morning, I posted a photo of Rex at the vet with his surgery cone and bandages to the family group chat. Even my uncle, who had defended my parents, at first reacted with heart emojis. Mom texted from a new number I didn't recognize, saying she was glad he was okay. I stared at her message for a long time before saving the number, but not responding. 2 days after surgery, Rex came home and needed medicine every 4 hours, plus help going to the bathroom. The school approved my absence request so I could take care of him. He was so weak he could barely stand, but when he saw me, his tail did this tiny wag that made everything worth it. I slept on the floor next to his bed and set alarms through the night for his pain medication. The pet store manager rearranged the schedule without me even asking, so I could work shorter shifts and leave if Rex needed me. My co-workers had collected a box of supplies like soft blankets and special recovery food for dogs. One girl who worked in the grooming department gave me a bottle of dry shampoo for dogs since Rex couldn't have real baths yet. Their kindness caught me off guard, and I had to go to the bathroom so they wouldn't see me tear up. 2 weeks later, CPS scheduled a supervised visit with my parents at their office downtown. Walking into that beige room with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs felt like entering another world. Dad looked older, with dark circles under his eyes, and Mom couldn't stop fidgeting with her purse strap. We sat at a round table with the CPS worker taking notes, while we talked about safe topics like my grades and the weather. Nobody mentioned Rex or the money or the gambling. When the hour was up, we all stood awkwardly, and Mom reached toward me, then pulled her hand back. Dad just nodded, and they left first while I stayed behind to talk to the worker about how it went. The worker asked if I felt safe going back to Grandma's, and I nodded while signing some papers she needed for her report. Outside in the parking lot, Grandma was waiting in her car, and I climbed in feeling like someone had drained all the energy from my body. We drove home in silence, and when we got there, Rex limped over to me immediately, pressing against my legs and following me to the couch where I collapsed. He climbed up next to me, even though his surgery site was still tender, and rested his head on my lap while I stared at the TV without really watching. The counselor at the school noticed I was quieter than usual the next day, and pulled me aside after our session to remind me that healing wasn't a straight line. She showed me a graph with ups and downs instead of a smooth curve upward, and said most kids felt worse after first visits, before things got better. Rex must have sensed something was off because that whole evening he stayed within 3 feet of me, even following me to the bathroom and waiting outside the door. 2 weeks later, Grandma drove me to a community center where her Gam-Anon group was having a special family day with snacks and folding chairs arranged in a big circle. I didn't want to go, but she said it might help to meet other people dealing with the same stuff. The room had about 30 people, including 5 or 6 kids around my age, sitting together in one corner, looking just as uncomfortable as I felt. The group leader asked if anyone wanted to share, and after 3 adults talked about their experiences, I raised my hand without really planning to. I told them about the surveillance games and the stolen money and Rex's surgery and how weird it felt to see my parents in that supervised visit. When I finished, one of the other teenagers came over during the break and said his dad had done similar things with his college fund. We ended up exchanging numbers along with the other kids our age, and someone started a group chat that night called GA Kids, where we could vent without adults watching. 3 weeks after Rex's surgery, I clipped his leash on for the first time since the operation, and we walked slowly to the end of Grandma's driveway. His legs were shaky, and he kept stopping to sniff everything, but his tail was wagging the whole time. We made it halfway down the block before he started panting hard, and I carried him back even though he weighed almost 40 pounds. Each day we went a little further, until finally we completed a full loop around the block, with him walking the entire way. The vet checked him over at his follow-up appointment, and said the bone was healing perfectly, and his muscles were getting stronger every day. Meanwhile, my parents had been going to their required counseling sessions twice a week, according to the CPS worker who called with updates. After 2 months of sessions, they filed paperwork requesting increased visitation, and the judge approved 1 unsupervised visit per week at a public location. The first meeting was at a coffee shop downtown where they were already sitting at a corner table when Grandma dropped me off. Dad stood up when I walked in, but then seemed unsure if he should hug me, so we just did this awkward half-wave thing instead. Mom had ordered my favorite drink, which was sitting at my spot getting cold because I was 5 minutes late from almost backing out in the parking lot. We talked about safe topics like a TV show we all used to watch and how the coffee shop had remodeled since last year. Nobody mentioned gambling or Rex or the money until the very end when Mom said they were trying really hard to change. I nodded and said I had to go because Grandma was waiting and walked out feeling confused about whether I wanted them to change or just wanted to stay mad forever. School felt different living at Grandma's house without the exhaustion from pretending to sleep every night. My chemistry teacher pulled me aside after class to say she'd noticed my test scores going up and asked if I'd gotten a tutor. I just said things were more stable at home now, and she smiled like she understood without needing details. My English essays came back with better grades, and even math started making more sense when I could actually focus instead of worrying about that night's surveillance games. The report card that came home 3 months later had straight B's with 2 A's, the best grades I'd gotten since middle school. Grandma stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a cat and took a picture to send to my aunt. 6 weeks after filing the fraud report, the bank called Grandma to say their investigation was complete and they'd recovered most of the stolen money. My parents had to sign an agreement to pay back the rest in monthly installments that would take almost 3 years to finish. The bank sent Grandma a check for $1,800, which she deposited into a new account at a completely different bank across town. Dad texted me that night saying the restitution payments would destroy their credit, but he knew they deserved it. 3 months into working at the pet store, the manager called me into her office and I thought I was in trouble for something. Instead, she said she was promoting me to shift supervisor with a $1.50 raise per hour. The extra responsibility meant counting the register and training new employees, but I liked having something to focus on besides family drama. When my first Employee of the Month certificate came in, Grandma bought a frame from the dollar store and hung it in the hallway next to my report card. By the 4th month after surgery, Rex was completely healed and racing around Grandma's backyard chasing squirrels he had no chance of catching. His limp was gone, and he could jump onto my bed without help, something that seemed impossible when he could barely walk. Watching him play tug-of-war with a rope toy or sprint across the grass made every hard decision worth it. He still slept next to my bed every night, sometimes putting his paw on the mattress like he was checking I was still there. One afternoon, I got home from the school to find a letter addressed to me in Mom's handwriting sitting on the kitchen counter. Inside was 2 pages of her apologizing without making excuses or blaming anyone else for her choices. She wrote about starting her own therapy separate from the court-required sessions and learning about addiction patterns from her childhood. She said she understood if I never forgave her, but wanted me to know she was sorry for stealing from me and Rex and for all the surveillance and lies. I read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer, not ready to respond, but not wanting to throw it away either. The GA Kids group chat turned into actual hangouts when someone suggested meeting at the mall on Saturday. 4 of us showed up and walked around eating pretzels and making fun of overpriced clothes, nobody talking about parents or gambling or therapy. We started meeting every weekend for movies or food, sometimes just sitting in someone's car listening to music and complaining about homework. Having friends who understood without needing explanations made everything feel less heavy and weird. Spring came and went with the family group chat, settling into pictures of gardens and birthday reminders instead of angry messages about stolen money. Some cousins still wouldn't talk to my parents, but most people had moved on to their own problems. Dad kept going to his GA meetings every Tuesday and Thursday night and started collecting those plastic chips they give you for staying clean. When he got his 6-month chip, he texted me a picture of it and asked if I'd come to the ceremony where they hand it out. I showed up at the community center and watched him stand in front of 30 other gambling addicts telling his story about losing his family over scratch-offs and sports betting. His voice cracked when he mentioned kicking Rex and stealing from his mother and son. After the meeting, he walked over holding the blue chip and said thanks for coming. The court date for Grandma's guardianship came up faster than expected when my parents signed the consent forms without fighting it. We sat in the small courtroom for maybe 20 minutes while the judge asked basic questions about my living situation and school attendance. My parents sat 2 rows back looking at their phones while the judge stamped the papers making it official. Walking out with the legal documents in Grandma's purse felt like breathing easier for the first time in months. The animal shelter near Grandma's house needed weekend volunteers, so I signed up using my pet store experience on the application. Rex came with me after I got him certified as a therapy animal through an online program that mostly just wanted the $100 fee. The scared dogs at the shelter would relax when Rex sat near their cages wagging his tail and letting them sniff through the bars. One pit bull mix who growled at everyone would let Rex lick his face through the fence and even started eating again after 3 days of refusing food. Every first Saturday of the month, my parents came to Grandma's house for dinner with strict rules about what we could talk about. Mom brought dessert from the grocery store bakery, and Dad washed dishes after we ate. We talked about the weather and TV shows and Rex's latest tricks, but never about money or the past or anything that mattered. The dinners got less awkward after the 3rd one, when Dad mentioned he got promoted to assistant manager at his warehouse job. Layla messaged me about a gaming convention coming to the city 2 hours away, and her parents offered to drive us both if we split gas money. Meeting her in person after talking online for 2 years felt weird for about 5 minutes until she made the same joke about our terrible teammates that she always made in Discord. We spent the whole day trying new games and eating overpriced pizza and watching cosplayers pose for pictures. She bought me a Rex keychain from a vendor selling custom pet merchandise, and I got her a poster signed by her favorite streamer. Having someone who knew the whole story, but treated me normal anyway, made the convention the best day I'd had in forever. My guidance counselor helped me apply to colleges, including one with a good veterinary program that offered partial scholarships for students with documented hardship. The acceptance letter came in April with enough financial aid to make it work with loans and Grandma's help. She cried reading it at the kitchen table and even posted about it in the family group chat where my parents both sent congratulations messages with heart emojis. Getting approved for Rex as an emotional support animal for the dorms took 3 forms and a letter from my therapist, but the housing office stamped it approved. Junior year ended with me packing boxes for college and Rex following me around the house like he knew something was changing. My parents came to graduation and sat with Grandma taking pictures like a normal family, even though we hadn't been normal in over a year. Life settled into something good enough with Rex healthy and running around the dog park every morning before my shift at the pet store. College started in 3 months and I'd saved enough for books and supplies from my supervisor pay raises. The family group chat posted normal stuff, and my parents kept going to their meetings and therapy, and Rex slept next to my bed every night with his paw touching the mattress, checking I was still there. Thanks for wandering through all of this with me. It's been really interesting sharing these moments together. I'll catch you next time. Subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for wandering through all of this with me. It's been really interesting sharing these moments together. I'll catch you next time. Subscribe for more content like this.